I feel the spirit moving in me. I feel the spirit moving in me.
What if I told you that every moment of love, every compassionate, self-accepting thing that you do is rewiring your brain? Every time you experience kindness, every time you have a connection with someone, you are literally creating new pathways in your brain. And these pathways, they're not just concepts, but real physical changes in the structure of your brain that allow you to feel more connected, more resilient, and more compassionate. Anybody want that? Right? We used to think that our brain was fixed, right? We only have so many cells, we only have so many neurons in our brain, but science is discovering that we have the ability to increase the amount of neurons and neural cells in our brains, and we can do that by the way we think, how we act, and the way we are in the world. You know, love is a powerful force that can physically reshape your brain, my brain. It can enhance our resilience and expand our capacity for connection. I've written this talk in conjunction with Tara Brach's teachings and also new neuroscience concepts that I've been studying and interested in. You know, Tara Brach is anybody know who Tara Brach is? Right? She's a psychologist. If you don't know her, you got to check her out. Go to her YouTube page, find her website, listen to her meditations. It will change your life. She's a psychologist. She's a Buddhist. She's a meditation teacher. And her teachings remind us that love isn't something that just happens to us. It's something that we cultivate. It's something that you can cultivate in your life. And science, interestingly enough, is backing this up, which is why I'm changing the way and the things that I talk about on Sunday, because these philosophies, these ideas, these spiritual beliefs that we've had, right, and unity is really forward thinking, that the concepts, the principles, and the teachings are now being backed up by science, right? And man, that just gets me so excited to know that. And so that's why I'm delving into things at a deeper level to help us to remember that these just aren't bizarre thoughts or ideas or teachings that we have. They are things that are being proved in science. You know, and science backs up that when we engage in love and compassion, our brains release chemicals that change our experience, right? Our brains release oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, characters that are chemicals that not only foster connection, but at the same time reduce stress, build resilience, and enhance our capacity to enjoy our lives. Wow, that to me is mind-blowing, right? You know, neuroscience reveals something extraordinary, that love and compassion literally enhance our brains. You can enhance your brain through love and compassion. So Tara Brach talks a lot about radical acceptance, and it's if you want to read an amazing book that's phenomenal, check out her book Radical Acceptance that came out some time ago. It's not about being passive. It's about the active practice of acknowledging reality just as it is without judgment. And we're going to talk about more of that today, about what is that reality? How can we radically accept what's happening in our lives in such a way that we build compassion for ourselves and others and experience healing? You know, when we meet life with radical acceptance, we rewire our brain's fear-based responses, moving towards resilience and connection. Anybody that doesn't want that, right? We're moving away from the fearful beings that we have evolved from into being more compassionate beings, to live our lives in this century, in this time, with more compassion and with more love. So, practicing radical acceptance, it actually reduces the amygdala, which is a kind of a almond-shaped organ in our brain that is kind of our fear center, right? When the amygdala gets stimulated, it gets us into this fearful response of wanting to fight, wanting to fly or flee, or wanting to freeze. And how does that work for you? Right? When we respond to life from that place, are we operating at our highest level? We're not. And so what this radical acceptance helps us to do is to increase our emotional response to life. Right? And I've heard the Dalai Lama and other Buddhists say that awakening is really about being able to be present in life to whatever happens, and not to do it in a fearful or angry or mean way, but to totally be present to what's happening. Radical acceptance also helps us cultivate self-compassion. And it's interesting because it helps us not only cultivate self-compassion, but continue to experience it and to express it. And as I mentioned earlier, radical acceptance also helps us build resilience, right? So we can be resilient to what's happening in the world. And by God, do we need it right now, right? To be able to cope and to be resilient to what's happening, to respond from our hearts, from compassion towards ourselves and compassion towards others. And boy, do we need that. And the next thing it does is to help us create connection with others. Take a breath into that. Feel that. Boy, do we have such a great opportunity right now to be connected to each other. So think about something that you're struggling to accept that's happening in your life right now. Could be grieving a loss, could be experiencing a health challenge, could be feeling overwhelmed, could be feeling rejection or failure. Have anybody ever experienced any of these things? Right? I'd be willing to bet that most of us, if not all of us, have experienced all of these things at some time in our life. So we're going to look at today, how can we, by embracing radical acceptance, how can we have compassion for ourselves in the middle of experiencing these things so that our response to life comes from self-compassion and love? I've created an acronym for the steps in this process of radical acceptance. And I've used the word anchor to guide us through this process. We can think of anchor as a tool to anchor our mind in love and compassion, especially in times that are challenging or struggling. And so I'm going to use and give an example for each one of these things that we talked about as we move through. I'll give an example for example, on what we might experience if we're grieving a loss. And so my hope is that something that you are challenged with is going to be similar to one of these things. I'm not hoping that it's similar to one of these things. I don't want to say that. But is that it's enough of an example for you that you can see how you can apply the steps in anchor to your life to move through the challenge that you are facing. Good? Is that good? Are you up for that? All right. So let's have some fun with it. And I know this is deep. And so let's just take a breath and recognize that this is a safe place. So the A in anchor stands for acknowledging the struggle. Right? So we might say to ourselves, well, let me back up a little bit and say that this is about accepting what is happening, right? And just kind of realizing, okay, this is what's happening. I'm challenged with this thing, and so we're just kind of acknowledging that we have a struggle in our life. So it's about accepting what it is, and when we accept it, it helps us to reduce the resistance that we have to it so we can experience transformation and change. And if you're on your phone, I suggest you put your phone down. You know, sometimes when we're in the midst of healing, we get distracted, and I want you really to pay attention. So when we accept what's happening, it reduces resistance and helps us make a space for healing. So if we're grieving a loss, we might say, I'll never be okay without them. Ever felt that? I'll never be okay without this person, without this animal. If we're experiencing a health challenge, we might say, I'm never going to be able to do the things that I want to do. If we're feeling overwhelmed, we might say, I just can't handle this. Anybody ever said that? Right? It's so huge. I just can't get through it. And if we're facing rejection or failure, we might say to ourselves, I can never be successful. I can never do this. I can never make this work. So remember, when we acknowledge we're accepting what's happening, and that lowers our resistance to it. And the second thing, the N in anchor, stands for naming the feeling. So once we acknowledge the struggle, we want to name the feeling or the emotion that we're feeling. Are we angry? Are we sad? Are we overwhelmed? Are we afraid? And when we state what we're feeling, it actually opens the door to self-compassion so that we can be self-compassionate for ourselves. And this is where the healing begins. So often you might see people who are, oh, I'm okay. Oh, I don't need any help, right? Oh, I can do this. And in that place, you're shutting off the ability to connect with yourself and to have compassion for yourself. So we're just simply naming the feeling. And, some new agey people might say, oh, you never want to claim that you're hurting. Well, that's old. That's old thinking, right? The new thinking, the new neuroscience, the new psychology is all about name it. This is what you're experiencing. Don't push it away. Don't say it's not real. And you can do that if you want, but I guarantee you it's not going to work. So if you're grieving a loss, it's okay to say, you know what? I'm sad. I'm lonely. I'm hurting. If you got health challenges, it's okay to say, you know what? I'm angry. This pisses me off. Anybody ever been angry at their body? Right? Oh, it's getting old, for God's sakes. My hair is falling out, for Pete's sake. When I got out of the shower today, there was a big gob of hair in the bottom of the shower. And I'm like, I could be pissed off about this, or I could just go, whatever. It's what's happening. If you're feeling overwhelmed, just to say, I feel frustrated. Right? We're having compassion. We're opening the door for compassion and being present to the moment. And if you're facing rejection or what feels like failure, just to say, you know what, I'm afraid. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid. And again, we're opening the door for healing. And then the C in anchor stands for check in with my resistance. Check in with resistance. And this is where we stop resisting what we're experiencing, right? Because we tend to, when we're facing resistance, avoid, deny, or fight. Right? If there's something, a challenging situation, oftentimes our first response is to deny it. This is not what's happening, right? If I'm grieving a loss, we might say, this person shouldn't have left me. I know when I lost my mom when I was 8 years old, there's a part of me that said, she can't leave me. I'll never be the same. And I looked for her every place I went. Or, we can deny that something isn't happening. That's not true. This is not happening. I'm not hurting. Deny it, thinking that there's some strength in that denial. Or fighting with what's happening. I don't like this, so I'm going to fight against it. This isn't what I want. If we're facing health challenges, or we might say something like, well, this diagnosis can't be right. I refuse to accept it. My body is not feeling this way. My body's not hurting in this way. Or if we're feeling overwhelmed, we might say, well, this isn't how life is supposed to be. This isn't what I signed up for. Anybody ever feel that way? It's like, why is this happening to me? This isn't what I want. And if we're facing rejection or failure, we may say, you know what? I'm never going to get this. I just don't think I have it in me to get this, to do this. Our resistance is a response to pain. We want to deny, we want to fight, or we want to avoid. And those things keep us from hiding or from healing, Right? You've heard the saying, what we resist persists. It's an old philosophy, right? It's an old idea that I heard 40 years ago when I first discovered unity. Well, because it's based in science. If we keep pushing against something, resisting something, we're not going to be able to heal with it. That which leads us to the next stage, the H in anchor, which stands for hold space for acceptance. And this is really where the healing happens. We acknowledge, this is my experience right now. So take a deep breath. I heard somebody else do it. It's like, okay, acceptance is the key. This is really where the healing begins, because we're holding a space for that experience to happen. So take a breath and breathe into that, holding the space for the best possible result, for that healing, that healing energy of light and love that is the essence of who you are to happen. You know, if we're grieving a loss, from this space of acceptance, we can say, this relationship has ended. It hurts. And I need time to grieve. But I will heal. Can you feel the difference happening in this idea? We're letting go of the stuff that's not serving us and embracing the truth. Embracing the possibility. If we have health challenges, we might say something like, yeah, I've received this diagnosis. I may not like it, but now I can take care of myself. Right? Now I can make the choice to make the best of what I am, who I am, and how I live my life right now. If we're feeling overwhelmed, we might say, this is challenging, but I will get through it. Anybody experienced that before? Anybody ever said, wow, this is difficult, this is challenging, but I will get through it? You know, I had, Tom mentioned that I was sick earlier this week. I had showed up on Tuesday. I had some bumps on my head that were itchy, and I thought, well, certainly this is spider bites, right? Because spiders like me. I guess I'm tasty or whatever, right? But I've been challenged with spider bites all of my life and had to go to the dermatologist sometimes to get things removed that got huge. And so I had all these things on my face. And then on Wednesday, I'm kind of like, you know, I kind of feel kind of lousy. I wonder what that's about. Is it possible that spider bites can make you sick, right? So what did we do? Where did I go for information? Google, yeah. So I went on Google and I'm asking, is it possible that spider bites can make you sick? And they're like, yes, if you get a bunch of them, they can make you feel like you're sick, right? And the next day, Thursday, I'm like really feeling horrible, right? I got no energy. It feels like I'm moving through molasses, right? So I called the doctor up and told him, this are my symptoms. Should I come in? And they're all like, oh yeah, come in right now. And they looked at my face, on my nose, and they said, you have shingles. Right? And, and I'm like, wow. But fortunately, I had the vaccine a couple years ago. And I'm fortunate that I went to the doctor as soon as I noticed them, and I'm taking an antiviral, right? And so I've been able to move through this really quickly. They didn't spread an inch, and the doctor told me they could go from my nose to my eyes because they follow the same nerve. So I didn't like the diagnosis, but it was what was real. I didn't like the way that I was feeling, but it was my reality. And I chose just to do nothing for 24 hours. And I sat on the couch, and Emily force-fed me and talked nice to me. And I got out of this in a remarkable time. A couple of days ago, if you had told me that I'd be here speaking, it's like I thought there's no way that I'd be able to do that. I couldn't get out of the lazy boy. And so I was feeling overwhelmed, and I felt like this is challenging, but I will get through it. I knew that I would get through it some way, somehow. And if we're feeling rejection or failure, we can say, this is painful, but it happened, and I will focus on what I can do next. So as I began to get my strength back, on Friday, I started working on my talk, and I finished it on Saturday. And by Saturday, I'm like, I'm good. If I've improved this much in one day, I know by the time Sunday gets here, I'm going to be able to do this. And I think a lot of what happened for me in that process was because I was the O, and I was open to compassion. And I just totally loved myself and agreed to take care of myself and not be angry with myself, to soften myself to compassion. You know, it's sometimes we need to give the same advice or handle ourselves in the same way that a dear friend would handle us. And I know what I would tell a friend in this situation is just take care of yourself. Have compassion for yourself. Love yourself. You know, when we open to compassion, we engage our brain's love circuits, and we begin to rewire our responses for love. And with that, wiring those responses for love and compassion is where the healing begins. If we're grieving a loss, you know, we might say, losing this person, losing someone I love is incredibly painful. And it's okay to feel deeply. If we're having health challenges, and this was my affirmation, my body and I are on the same team, and I treat myself with kindness and patience. When feeling overwhelmed, to say, you know, I'm doing the best that I can with what I have, and it's okay to take things one step at a time. Sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we feel like we have to do everything all at once. And if we just slow down and take one thing at a time. And if we're facing rejection or failure, to say, you know what, this situation doesn't define me. Every challenge is an opportunity to learn. When we're open to compassion, we rewire the brain for self-acceptance, for inner peace, and for making love and not fear. And we change our default response to life's challenges. And that's what this is all about, right? We're talking about changing the way we respond to the challenges that we have in our lives. This is the definition of enlightenment. And then the R in anchor stands for reaffirm with love. And we're reaffirming that acceptance, that self-acceptance is an act of self-love. This is about reminding ourselves that we're not alone in the suffering. That through radical acceptance, we are building emotional resilience and cultivating love within ourselves. And if we're grieving a loss, we might say, though this is painful, I honor my feelings and carry love with me. Take a breath and feel that. I honor my feelings and go back to that sense of love. And if we're experiencing health challenges, we can say something like, I love my body, and I treat my body with kindness and patience. And if we're feeling overwhelmed, we might say, I am enough just as I am. I take one step at a time and trust that love will guide me. And if we're feeling failure or rejection, we might say, I am worthy, no matter what. This experience empowers me to love and to grow. By reaffirming with love, we reclaim our power and move forward with grace rather than staying stuck in the suffering. Compassion is the bridge between acceptance and healing. This is where it happens. Having compassion for ourselves leads to healing. By practicing compassion, we engage our brain's neural pathways and enhance emotional regulation and empathy, allowing us to connect more deeply with ourselves and with others. It's like exercising a muscle. The more we practice self-acceptance, radical acceptance, and self-compassion, the stronger these muscles become. So I invite you this week, let's say our affirmation together. First, let's take a breath and kind of clear the air of all these thoughts, and knowing that we are hearing just what we need to hear today to experience the fullness healing that is possible for each one of us. And let's say this together. I open my heart to compassion, trusting in its power to heal and transform me. So my call to action this week is to invite you into the anchor process, to acknowledge a struggle when you experience it, and to start small. Start with something simple and just try it. I hope that you don't just walk home, not practice this stuff, or throw the walk your talk away, but I hope you practice it. That's why we're doing this stuff. That's why I hope you come here. So acknowledge a struggle. Name the feeling or the emotion that you're having. Check in and see, do I have resistance to what I'm experiencing? And hold the space for acceptance. Can you just be okay with what is? And then open yourself to compassion for yourself, to feel it, to be it, to live it. And then reaffirm with the practices of love that you know. And I invite you to close your eyes. Taking a deep breath and breathing into this moment. I open my heart to compassion, trusting in its power to heal and transform me. Breathing in, breathing out. I invite you to look within and to see, is there a place in your mind, your body, that's calling for your compassion today? Physically, mentally, feeling, grieving a loss, got a healing challenge, feeling stressed and overwhelmed, facing thoughts of failure, rejection. I invite you to take a deep breath in and imagine that the light of compassion is shining on this part of you right now. And see it melting any resistance. Imagine yourself as whole and complete and receptive and loving and powerful. See yourself anchoring in this truth, knowing that you are a divine being, experiencing the fullness of life, the powerful being that you are, the presence that you are, the love that you are. And imagine that your own beingness is holding you. The spiritual essence that you are is holding you, comforting you, loving you. Breathe into that. Imagine that you can soak this up in every cell, every space, every tissue, every thought, every feeling is absorbing this radical acceptance, this radical self-love and compassion. Knowing that you are whole and alive and energized and powerful right now. See yourself moving from fear to love right now. Breathing in and breathing out. And I invite you to begin to bring your awareness back to this moment. And so we'll say the prayer for protection, and then we'll join together as a circle and sing the peace song. Are you good for that?
Good.
Everybody? All right. So for ourselves, for the world, for this planet, for all life, let's affirm and pray together the prayer for protection, which begins, the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us wherever we are. God is. Thank you for being here today.
Where I live, there are rain.